Today I thought I'd do a video on a general guideline for sandpaper usage in a body shop. Again, it's just a rundown of the most common grits and tools found in shops that I've worked at. You can certainly deviate from each grit depending on the product, material, or paint you're using. For all of your heavy sanding needs or grinding needs, like removing paint or preparing to apply filler, the only disc you'll have to buy is a 7-inch 36 grit fiber resin disc. They're super sharp. When you use them on slow speed, filler really likes to stick to that. They can be used on a grinder like this, 7-inch, or cut down, used on a small grinder, or even an electric grinder. Now, even though you do see grinders like this used on TV or the internet, they're great for fabrication, grinding angle iron frames and some heavy-duty welds, but they're not really made for body work because of the high speed and the chance of you grinding or making the metal too thin with this. And filler really likes to stick well to the slow speed, heavy scratches that are made by these 36 grit fiber resin discs. The next tool is not really necessary and you can get away with not having it, but if you do have a Bondo hog, you'll want to get some 40 grit and some 80 grit. The 40 grit is great for sanding filler down, and the 80 grit is actually pretty good if you have large areas that need to be block sanded, like if you're using feather fill or you have a huge area that you want to block sand down real quick. This will knock it down fast, then you can hit it with the board. So 40 grit and 80 grit is all you need for the hog. If you don't have a Bondo hog, that's fine. You can get away with just using boards. For your board paper, you're going to have 40, 80, and 120. The 40 grit is used for knocking down your body filler really quick. The 80 grit is for finishing off your body filler, or you can even use it for block sanding large areas of primer surfacer like feather fill or even your regular primer. You can knock it down real quick with the 80 grit. And then for your everyday block sanding of primer surfacer, you'll have the 120. So real quick, 40 is for your filler, 80 is also for filler, finishing it up, or even block sanding, and the 120 is your everyday primer block sanding paper. For DA paper, you really only need 120 and 220, or finer if you like. The 120 is your rough paper for feather edging, removing scratches and chips, and your 220, 240, 320, whatever you like, is for finish sanding or paint prep. For finish sanding by hand, you'll be wet sanding with 320 grit or 400 grit. And then to get in all the corners and the tight spots, you'll be using the red Scuff pad. And finally, for wet sanding and buffing single stage paint or clear coat, you can use some 1000 grit or finer depending on what you like. And I keep some 1200 grit DA paper around to speed it up a bit. In review, you can get away with not having a Bondo hog, so the only sandpaper you really need for body work is 36 grit for grinding, 40, 80, and 120 for board sanding, 120 and 220 for the DA, 400 for wet sanding by hand if you want to prep for paint that way, the red Scuff pad for hard to get areas, and 1000 grit or finer for wet sanding and buffing. I hope you enjoyed this video on a general guide for Autobody sandpaper, and if you did and you'd like to get my latest videos, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.